Close to 200 Venezuelan migrants in Peru are set to return to the Bolivarian Republic under the Return to the Homeland Plan. Social organizations in Colombia plan to collect 1 million signatures in defense of the peace agreements. U.S. President Donald Trump is set to launch his 2020 re-election campaign. Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Doris Polo in Quito, and this is from the South. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has spoken out against the country's opposition amid damning allegations that surfaced of widespread corruption in the Colombian city of Cúcuta, even involving opposition leaders Juan Guaido and Leopoldo Lopez. President Maduro says these allegations of corruption surrounding the opposition come as no surprise.
While we are fighting and governing every day, taking care of all the issues our people currently face, they were doing the same old things they always do. Their corruption is nothing new. The only thing that is new is the obscenity of how they stole all the money and how they share it among themselves. They laugh in the face of the US government and the so-called humanitarian aid. They stole everything and then spend it like crazy. Evidence of all of this has already come out.
Community orchards are productive spaces near people's homes where vegetables, medicinal plants, and sometimes even cattle are grown and cared for. These community initiatives seek to battle an international blockade that has made access to food and medicine increasingly difficult.
Agricultural production does not stop, not even in the face of a criminal economic blockade by the US government. Some communities have already begun the winter productive cycle, as announced by President Nicolas Maduro. The winter 2019 plan for cereal crops includes planting over 36,000 hectares of corn, 40,000 hectares of sorghum, and 30,000 hectares of rice. The Urban Agricultural Ministry seeks to improve the cereal seeding cycle with the help of local communities.
We will continue with our fight, but this time we're on the counter-offensive. We are taking back our crops. We are all working together to take back our agriculture and fight back.
The state of Yaracuy is found to the west of Venezuela. Here it's common to find fertile land. In the Vista Alegre community, people have organized to grow their own crops and care for their own cattle.
What matters now is that we have food available. If we have a piece of land, we need to use it for production.
Supporting small farmers by providing them with supplies and tools to develop the land has been one of the main tasks of the national government.
The Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ, has ruled last December's no-confidence motion was validly passed in Guyana with a majority of 33 votes. The government had argued that 34 votes were needed to pass the motion. The CCJ president says Guyana's constitution clearly states that the government must resign when it loses to a no-confidence motion. The court adds that nothing stopped then-government MP Charan Das Prasad from voting against a measure, but he could still be recalled and the vote would still be valid. On the question of Prasad's eligibility to become a candidate and sit in the parliament, the CCJ found that could only be challenged through an election petition. However, the deadline for doing so has long passed. The court did not state what would be the effect of its decision on the holding of general elections. Over 180 Venezuelan migrants will be repatriated this week from Peru as part of the Bolivarian government's Return to the Homeland Plan. 2 flights are set for Tuesday and Wednesday, carrying 90 passengers each. This group will be part of almost 3,000 Venezuelan migrants that have returned to their country from Peru. This government program started in September of last year, under which 14,250 people have returned to Venezuela.
There were no jobs, so we can't stay here. Salaries are not enough to cover expenses. Thank God we have this opportunity to return, although it will be difficult. I'm going to keep my hopes up that everything is going to get better. There's nothing like my home and my family.
The Peruvian prosecutor's office has requested almost 17 years of prison for former President Alejandro Toledo for alleged money laundering. Toledo, who served as Peru's president between 2001 and 2006, is under trial for money laundering through real estate purchases in the so-called Ecoteva case. The court has renewed a request to extradite Toledo from the United States, where he reportedly lives. This latest case is also linked to Operation Lava Jato, under which Toledo is already facing trial for receiving bribes from Brazilian construction company Odebrecht. We move to Colombia, where under the slogan "In Defense of Peace," social leaders have launched a campaign to collect 1 million signatures demanding that the government respect the 2016 peace agreements. Let's find out more.
Various Colombian political and social sectors have launched a campaign in defense of peace, with a key component being giving the victims of the armed conflict a voice and protecting their rights through the special jurisdiction for peace.
The rights of the victims will be respected. We will represent the appeal and join the initiative of 1 million signatures so citizens' voices can be heard. And then in October we can vote in our candidates to Congress, and we don't lose the past 4 years of the peace agreement.
16 seats in Congress that were given as a part of the peace agreement for the 18 departments most affected by the armed conflict were eliminated due to an apparent lack of quorum in Congress.
It's important to respect the agreement and the seats given for the victims, because they are leaders that will bring to Congress the real situation in their communities, so the state can find a solution. These are hot zones, which have been submerged in misery and historical exclusion. They need to be in Congress to present their situation, and the state must give priority to these conflicts.
Another main point in this initiative is stopping the systematic murders of social leaders across the country. A grave humanitarian situation that, according to experts, can become worse after local and regional elections in October.
We launch an initiative to protect the leaders who are being killed. It's a collective protection in their territories so stigmatization and threats can end.
On top of the murders of social leaders, there's also the murders of former combatants who want to return to civilian life.
This is done to place an obstacle to the implementation of the agreements, to create fear. We are asking for an investigation on both a national and international level of these systematic murders. They are not isolated incidents. The objective is to undo the Havana agreements.
1 million signatures will be the beginning of a battle to defend peace, while also seeking to counterbalance the initiative of Uribismo, which wants to collect 8 million signatures to finally destroy the special jurisdiction for peace.
A number of Central American asylum seekers have been returned to the border city of Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, after being separated from their families. Under a program called Remain in Mexico, asylum seekers are forced to await the outcome of their U.S. asylum claims outside the U.S. The Trump administration has been preparing for the immediate expansion of the controversial practice along the entire southern border. According to officials, close to 12,000 people have been returned to Mexico since the program started in January.
How else should I feel? I wanted to be with my family and we were returned. They said that we had a certain amount of time for the asylum process. We have a certain amount of time. We had hoped to wait over in the US because we wanted to be with our families, and we were brought here.
The Mexican President Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador says his country could win a trade war with the United States, but it would be a Pyrrhic victory. Earlier this month, Mexico and the United States struck a deal under which the Trump administration wouldn't introduce tariffs on imported Mexican goods. And under a joint declaration, Mexico agreed to send 6,000 troops to its border with Guatemala to curb irregular migration. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi has been laid to rest. Don't go away. Welcome back. Former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi has been buried after he collapsed in court and passed away on Monday. The burial was attended by members of his family in Cairo's Nasser city after authorities denied his burial in Morsi's home province of Sharqiya in the Nile Delta. According to authorities, the former president died from a heart attack. He was 67. He had been in custody on espionage charges since his ousting by the military in 2013 after protests against his rule. Morsi was also a senior figure in the Muslim Brotherhood. Our correspondent Nayara Tardo has more.
The
burial of Egypt's former president Mohamed Morsi has taken place. He passed away on Monday afternoon during a court appearance. The burial began in the morning after the medical commission examined the body. It was a small ceremony with only his family. On Monday, while Morsi was addressing the court, he fainted. And according to the Attorney General's office's report, he had a heart attack and died soon after. Western media has been reporting that the Muslim Brotherhood, which Morsi belonged to, was accusing the government of murdering him. The Attorney General's office ordered the setting up of a commission to analyze Morsi's body as well as the recordings from the security cameras inside the court. They will also interview everyone who was present at that time. But so far, the country remains calm.
That was Nayara Tardo in Egypt with that report. The president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, lamented the death of the former Egyptian president. President Erdogan was the first world leader to pay tribute to Morsi, calling him a martyr and offering condolences to his family. The Turkish president fiercely criticized Western silence following the 2013 coup that ousted Mohamed Morsi from power. 3 British members of parliament had previously warned that the conditions the former president was kept in could result in his premature death.
In our eyes, Morsi is a martyr who lost his life while he fought for the cause he believed in. History will never forget the tyrants who put him in prison, threatened him with death penalty, and caused his martyrdom.
Şehadetine yol açan zalimleri asla unutmayacaktır. Hem Cumhurbaşkanı seçilmeden önce
We formed a close friendship with him before he was elected president and preserved it afterwards. Morsi, who was put on trial by a court established by the coup, which sentenced him to death, gave his last breath in a courtroom, and this is a symbol of the cruelty inflicted upon him and his people for years.
Son nefesini vermiş olması adeta kendisine ve halkına yıllardır yapılan.
Meanwhile, Morsi's death drew thousands of mourners who gathered at a symbolic funeral in Turkey. The Muslim Brotherhood led the prayers in memory of Morsi as they raised questions about the cause of his death. Shifting gears now, at least 161 people have been killed in the Democratic Republic of Congo due to ethnic violence within the past week. The last round of violence was sparked by the killing of 4 Lendu business people on Monday by Hema herders. But according to officials, these 4 murders came after the Lendu had launched several attacks on Hema villages. Several people have fled the area to safety. The fighting between Hema herders and Lendu farmers over grazing rights and political representation has led to back and forth attacks in the recent years.
I didn't come here voluntarily, but because on Monday, June 10, around midday, we saw a group of people from the hills massacre our people and burn our villages. And since we have no weapons, we couldn't do anything, but look at our villages burning and our people dying. In fact, I myself lost a lot of members of my family and of my wife's family. One of my sisters-in-law was killed with her 5 children.
And a recent report by the United Nations says over 300,000 people have fled into ethnic violence in the DRC, which has greatly complicated the tracing and treatment of patients at risk from Ebola. Over 1,000 people have died from an Ebola outbreak in the DRC, with over 2,000 others having been infected. The UN says it fears that as more people flee ethnic violence, they will try to seek safety in Uganda, crossing Lake Albert and possibly spreading the virus.
As the displacement continues at this massive scale, fears are more people will try to seek safety in Uganda, crossing Lake Albert. So far, the numbers that we have seen are really small, but it could pick up with around or more than 300,000 people now fleeing within the last 2 weeks. More people could be forced to flee across Lake Albert into Uganda.
Rwanda's national airline launched its long-awaited flights to the Chinese city of Guangzhou on Tuesday. Rwanda Air will be operating 3 flights to what is now its 3rd Asian destination after Dubai and Mumbai. Guangzhou is now Rwanda Air's 28th destination after the airline launched flights between Kigali and the DRC's capital, Kinshasa, in April. The opposition movement in Sudan has warned of fresh protests against what they describe as the massacre of demonstrators in the capital. This comes after dozens of protesters were killed earlier this month when security forces violently dispersed a sit-in outside the military headquarters.
We are preparing the Sudanese people and our organizations in the neighborhoods and workers for any scenario, including that of another stalemate with the Transitional Military Council. We will have no choice but take up all types of grassroots activities and, of course, among them, demonstrations.
After the break, U.S. President Donald Trump launches his re-election campaign for 2020. Stay with us.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump is set to formally launch his 2020 re-election campaign on Tuesday at the Amway Center in Orlando, Florida. Taking to social media, Trump said, "We are building large movie screens outside to take care of everybody. Over 100,000 requests. Our country is doing great. far beyond what the haters and losers thought possible, and it will only get better. Florida is a critical swing state, as in 2016, this is where Trump beat Hillary Clinton by nearly 100,000 votes, setting him on his way to the White House. The first Democratic primary debates are also set to take place in Miami next week. Japan has issued a tsunami warning following a 6.8 magnitude earthquake off its western coast. The quake struck at the relatively shallow depth of 16.1 kilometers, and huge tremors were felt on the west coast of Honshu on Tuesday. Japan's weather agency has predicted a tsunami as high as 1 meter high along the coast of the northwestern prefectures of Yamagata, Niigata, and Ishikawa. There have been no immediate reports of casualties or damage. The death toll from a ferry that sank in Indonesia has risen to 18. The overloaded passenger boat was carrying more than 60 people when it overturned on Monday in rough seas near Maduro Island. Indonesia's Search and Rescue Agency says 39 people have been rescued. The search continues for 4 missing passengers. In other news, United Nations officials have urged renewed efforts to bring the conflict in Yemen to an end. The Saudi-led invasion of Yemen in 2015 caused what has been described as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. A ceasefire between the Houthi movement and the Saudi-backed Yemeni government brokered in Sweden late 2018 has reduced civilian deaths by 68% when comparing June with last December. The special envoy of the Secretary General addressed the Security Council by video link, saying that a solution must be found.
The longer the conflict goes on, the more challenges and the greater difficulties we will face in resolving it and reversing its terrible effect on the people of Yemen. The continued dialogue between the parties to implement the Stockholm Agreement is significant. But it is not enough for the Yemeni people. They want their suffering to end now and not tomorrow.
The United States is set to send 1,000 additional troops to the Middle East amid tensions with Iran. Acting U.S. Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan has announced that the troops will be deployed for defensive purposes. He says recent Iranian attacks validate the reliable intelligence Washington has received on hostile behavior by Iranian forces. News of the additional troop deployment comes on the heels of the U.S. State Department's announcement that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will travel Tuesday to the command center that oversees Middle East military operations. Meanwhile, Iran has accused Saudi Arabia of adopting a misguided approach and escalating tensions in the Gulf region. Tehran said that its local rival has opted for a militaristic crisis-based approach and that it is seeking to escape problems brought on by its own wrong policies. Riyadh has stepped up its rhetoric against Iran and has been backed by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, after an attack on 2 oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman last week. Despite assertions from the White House that Iran was responsible for the attack, many of Washington's allies remain skeptical. Now let's turn to more stories from around the world.
At least 12 people have been killed and more than 100 injured in a strong earthquake which shook China's Shandong province. The 6.0 magnitude earthquake was followed by several powerful aftershocks. More than 4,000 people have been relocated as their homes were damaged or even destroyed.
The city and counties quickly allocated all kinds of relief supplies from their disaster relief repositories to affected villages and towns. At the initial stage, 450 tents, 5,300 quilts, and 1,500 folding beds were sent to affected areas.
The Iran president says the world is praising Tehran over its standoff with the United States. President Rouhani said that the U.S. has broken promises by abandoning a landmark nuclear deal that Iran had continued to honor, adding that his country has been loyal to its signature and to international agreements.
Today we are in a face-off with America. There is no one in the world that does not prize Iran. Iran has been loyal to its word. Iran has been loyal to international agreements, and the one standing against us today is the one that has trampled all pacts, agreements, and international accords.
At least 60 people died in northeast India over the weekend from a heat stroke. In the region of Bihar, hospitals were full of patients suffering from heat exhaustion as temperatures soared to over 45 degrees Celsius. The regional government has ordered all schools to be closed until June 22nd due to the intense heat. India typically suffers from water scarcity during the summer months, but this year the situation is much worse due to the less than normal rainfall in the 2018 monsoon season.
And now from the 2019 Cricket World Cup in the United Kingdom. Afghanistan needs 267 runs to win from 18.4 overs in the match against the host England at Emirates Old Trafford. England captain Ian Morgan broke the record when he hammered 17 sixes in his 148 off 71 balls. His innings bears England to 397 for 6, their highest World Cup total. Afghanistan at the bottom of the table are batting. And before we end, thousands of dancers in Bolivia came together for a traditional parade known as the Morenada. 40,000 dancers and 7,000 musicians joined the festivities in La Paz, honoring the image of Jesus of the Great Power. Most of them belong to the Aymara indigenous community and are known for their dresses and suits, as well as elaborate masks and feathers. This is the 45th edition of this parade. The country is waiting for UNESCO to respond to its request to declare it an intangible cultural heritage. We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, remember you can find us on Starsat Channel 461 in South Africa and Channel 539 in Nigeria. And join us on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.